John Mateer is in the transfer portal, and man, does it have big implications for Syracuse.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for joining me later this evening than usual. I apologize. Normally, I upload at 6 p.m. Eastern, but I was traveling earlier today, so getting this up as soon as possible. And, of course, there was breaking news, so I'm recording it now, all right? And that is that Washington State quarterback John Mateer has officially entered the transfer portal per multiple sources. It's out there, On3, 24/7 Sports, you name it. He's the quarterback from Washington State, and it's got big implications on Syracuse. We're going to talk about the portal first because he is in the portal. Does it make sense for Syracuse? Spoiler alert, it does, but it's not going to happen. We'll go over, of course, the bowl implications of this because Syracuse is playing Washington State in a bowl game. And I don't know about you guys, but if you've been paying attention, Washington State has about a bajillion opt-outs right now. In fact, right before I hit the record button, someone else just opted out of the bowl game. And then to end the show, we are going to talk about the quarterback market as it stands currently. Before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So let's go over the portal ramifications for John Mateer. Look, he should be the priority number one for Syracuse. He's a quarterback. He's amazing. He should be the priority number one for any team in the country right now. And I'll just read you his numbers because they're pretty good, okay? I think he played every game this year. He's not going to play the bowl game, though. 65% completion rate, 3,100 passing yards, 29 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. So he's a very good thrower of the football. He's accurate and does not turn the ball over a ton. And then you get into his rushing numbers. 800 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. He is the belle of the ball in the transfer portal right now, okay? This is like the Juan Soto of the transfer portal. Shout out to any of the Mets fans who are watching or listening to this podcast. I myself am a Mets fan, and I'm still running on that high of the fact that Juan Soto is a New York Met. But I digress. John Mateer is head and shoulders the best quarterback in the transfer portal, and you can make an argument he's the best player in the transfer portal. It's kind of ironic how the two best players in the portal from year to year have both come from Washington State. If you recall, John Mateer was the successor to Cam Ward, who ended up at Miami, and we know what he did at Miami. He was in New York City for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He had a pretty good year, okay? So, of course, Syracuse needs a quarterback. He's really talented. We know that the Orange are a pretty decent landing spot for anyone, especially what happened with Kyle McCord this year. The fact that he was 10th in Heisman voting, I think we're pretty attractive for some quarterbacks. So is John Mateer feasible? Now is where we got to take our orange colored glasses off and just pretend that I had glasses on and I am taking them off. No, this is not a feasible option, to be very blunt with you guys. Unlike Juan Soto, there will not be multiple teams in the bidding for John Mateer. There really only appears to be one, and I'll give a dark horse maybe later on in this segment, but it would certainly just be my opinion. It's Oklahoma. Oklahoma is probably going to get John Mateer. It's very likely, in fact. On3 has already logged a prediction for this to happen, and you might be asking yourself, why? Why Oklahoma? Well, Oklahoma hired his offensive coordinator to be the offensive coordinator there. So there's familiarity, obviously. And if you're Oklahoma, I mean, why do you think they hired his offensive coordinator? I think it's because they want John Mateer, right? Oklahoma has a need. They need a quarterback. I mean, they had Jackson Ardone last year, and He entered the portal and committed to Auburn, which is actually good for us that Auburn is now out of the quarterback market. But so Oklahoma, I digress, needs a quarterback. They need a quarterback. They hired his offensive coordinator. This is maybe the big one too. It's Oklahoma. Money talks, my friends. They got a big budget, and I think they're willing to spend a lot of it on a guy like John Mateer, who, like I said, is the belle of the ball of this free agency. I just said free agency for the transfer portal. Actually, I think it's pretty accurate. I'm not going to take that back. It basically is free agency. And they want to win. Not to say that Syracuse doesn't, but it's Oklahoma. They went 6-6 last year. Yeah, 6-6 at Oklahoma doesn't exactly cut it. I would be shocked if John Mateer doesn't end up with Oklahoma. I would be shocked. It's not to say that Syracuse shouldn't at least kind of express interest. I don't think it'll matter. But they're going to end up with the big fish. And like I said, I would give you a dark horse. If I had to pick a dark horse, it would be Miami. Miami would be that dark horse team where it's like, okay, they just did it with one Washington State quarterback with Cam Ward. Why can't they do the same thing with John Mateer? That would be my dark horse. Now, assuming that John Mateer goes to Oklahoma and that he is not a feasible option for Syracuse, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, I mean, we want best quarterback in the portal / free agency, but hey, at least if Oklahoma gets John Mateer, they're out. They're done. They're not going to go out and get another guy in the portal. A lot of teams, they'll hug their guys no matter what. They'll take multiple positions. They won't care. I don't think a team like Oklahoma is going to take multiple guys just for the fun of it. I think they're a type of team where they're going to settle on John Mateer. Not really, settle's not the right word, but they'll get John Mateer and they'll leave everyone else alone. And Oklahoma, a desirable landing spot for a lot of quarterbacks, probably would be out of the quarterback market. We'll talk later in the podcast, like I said at the top, about the other quarterbacks in the market. But as far as John Mateer is concerned, do I want him on Syracuse? Yes. Do I think the fit would be awesome? Yes. Do I think Syracuse could be a really good team with him? Absolutely. Is it feasible? No, it's not going to happen. So that's John Mateer portal-wise. But there's more implications to this. It's not just transfer portal. I just wanted to start off with that, though. Bowl game. Syracuse football is playing Washington State in a bowl game. John Mateer's now former school. Let's talk about it, because is there even going to be a bowl game? That's coming up next on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, Syracuse football, as of right now, they're playing in the Holiday Bowl against Washington State. That's on December 27th. FanDuel at 5:58 p.m. on December 16th. As of right now, when I'm recording this, the Orange are 10.5-point favorites. That line has shifted by like 4 points since it was started, I think, at like 6.5. And that's mainly because we just talked about Washington State quarterback John Mateer. He's in the portal. He's not going to play. Kyle McCord, on the other hand, Syracuse's starting quarterback, will play. So that's why the odds are 10.5. And hey, maybe it boosts our chances at that 10th win. What do you think of those odds? You can bet it at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. And folks, we talked about John Mateer entering the portal and what it means for the Orange, specifically in the portal. And while, yes, I think myself, I could speak for most of you guys, if not all, we would love John Mateer in a Syracuse uniform next season. But like I told you, I would be shocked if he doesn't end up with Oklahoma. Like, legitimately shocked. Even by the time you're watching this or listening to this podcast, he might have already committed to Oklahoma following his offensive coordinator there. But it has more implications than just, hey, it's another quarterback in the portal. He's from Washington State. And this has big bowl game ramifications. And like I actually just said in that ad for FanDuel, Syracuse football is playing Washington State in the Holiday Bowl on the 27th. And now their quarterback is in the portal. It was expected, but now it's official. He's in the portal. I just saw one of their offensive tackles enter the portal as well, like 2 minutes before I hit the record button on this. So by my count, I could be plus or minus a couple of players off, but by my count as of right now, I think that's 20 Washington State players that have opted out of the bowl game or in the portal in free agency. That's 20 guys. Now, I want to address this quickly because I proposed the question at the end of the last segment. Is there even going to be a bowl game? I highly doubt that Washington State is going to entirely opt out. This is just my opinion here. I just don't see them opting out because how could you pass up on the payout? You do realize that these teams get paid to play in the bowl game. They get paid. So ideally, they want to make a bowl because they get the money from the bowl game. So why would Washington State say we don't want to play anymore? The reason why people maybe bring that up about Washington State is because if you've been paying attention to college football, look at what's going on with the Marshall football program. I think the entire roster, and I'm not joking when I say this, I think the entire roster is in the portal. They had to opt out by force. They had no choice. Washington State, yeah, they have a lot of players that are not going to be playing in this bowl game, but it's, to my count, it's 20. You can still field a team. So I don't have a source on it, but I just don't see it happening where Washington State's going to opt out. I think Syracuse is locked in with Washington State. Could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But I think there are two takeaways to this. Number one, it should make you kind of happy as a Syracuse fan, maybe. This means that a 10th win is a lot more likely. And obviously, you still got to play the games. And this game, no matter what, is not going to be guaranteed to go in Syracuse's favor. You still have to play the games, right? We talk about with the SEC and Alabama, if you put them on a neutral site or if they were playing each other, this team would be that double-digit favorite. It doesn't matter, the hypothetical. Having said that, is it more likely or not that Syracuse is going to win the game now that John Mateer and, to my count, 19 other Washington State players are out? Yeah. Exactly. So Syracuse is more likely, I should say, to get that 10th win. And guess what? Maybe you would take less pride in that because you'll sit here and say, well, the 10th win came against Washington State when none of their players were playing. I'll still take pride in it. That's not my problem if Washington State wants to have a ton of players not play. Not my problem. I'll take the 10th win. I'll take the 10th win for only the second time this century and the first time since 2018. I'll take a 10-win season in Fran Brown's first year as head coach. I mean, I already made a podcast earlier this month in early December that Fran Brown completed after the Miami game the greatest season by a first-year head coach in Syracuse history. If you want to check that out, if you think I'm crazy, you can go search up that podcast when you're done with this one because I legitimately believe it and the numbers back it up, in my opinion. So I'll take pride in the 10th win, and I think it's more likely that Syracuse gets that 10th win with all the players of Washington State opting out. The other thing that this kind of tells you is the culture that Syracuse has built. It's different. It's a little different now, isn't it? The winds are kind of changing, and I kind of find it funny how it's like a yin and yang, how now we have, I think, a pretty good football program, but our basketball program's in the toilet. That's neither here nor there. But with Fran Brown, he's all business, and he's no nonsense, and he is very open. And sometimes he's brutally honest, too, even in the media. He scoffed at the notion of players opting out for Syracuse. And look, I get opting out. I get it. I'm younger. I acknowledge that. And I think for maybe my older audience, they don't see it the same way as I do, but I get it. I am not staunch necessarily on players playing no matter what, but I do think they should play in bowl games. I think there are two exceptions to that, really. And the problem with the program is when it doesn't fall into one of these two categories. I think the two exceptions are a player is going to be a top NFL draft pick, or a player is in the portal in this day and age. Even though if you look at Syracuse's roster, a guy like Anwar Sparrow, a backup linebacker, entered the transfer portal. He's playing in the bowl game. He announced it himself. He wants to play. And I think that just shows you the culture that Syracuse has built. Like I said, there's two exceptions. If you're a top draft pick in the NFL, I get opting out entirely because I think the risk is too great. The fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm seeing and from what I'm reading, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are playing in the bowl game for Colorado. I think they're nuts. Cam Ward is playing in the bowl game for Miami. I think he's nuts. I think the risk for guys like that, I'm talking about those guys who are going to be like top 5, top 10 picks in the NFL draft. I think if you're playing in a bowl game, I think it's pretty insane. I think the risk is just too great. But Syracuse doesn't have those guys, maybe. They don't have a top 5, 10 pick on the roster, but what I'm talking about is they do have some mid-level NFL draft guys. They have guys on the roster that I think are going to be drafted into the NFL day 2, possibly, maybe day 3, or at very minimum, they're going to go into an NFL training camp. And that's where a culture problem can occur when you have those type of guys opting out of bowl games. You don't see Kyle McCord opting out. You don't see Oronde Gadsden, to my knowledge, hasn't opted out. LaQuinn Allen hasn't opted out. He hasn't declared yet, but could. Same with Oronde Gadsden. Fidel Diggs is not opting out. I bring that up because of a team like Florida State. I get that Florida State kind of got hosed last year, but they had basically everyone opt out. It wasn't just guys who were going to be top draft picks. It was everyone. That's a culture problem. And luckily for us, I don't think the Orange have that. So overall, I guess what are the takeaways of John Mateer entering the portal and the bowl ramifications? Number one is that, look, I don't think that Washington State is going to bow out of the bowl game. Number two, opt-outs. They certainly make the 10th win more likely for Syracuse. And number three, I think it only reinforces the culture that Syracuse has built. The fact that with the exception of a guy like Marcellus Barnes or maybe a few other guys in the portal, there are no opt-outs for Syracuse football. All of their players as of this moment are playing in it. And I think that reinforces the culture that they have built. Okay, so I think that really concludes all the John Mateer and the portal talk and the bowl ramifications talk. So coming up, we'll go back into the portal and we'll talk about the quarterback market next on Locked On Syracuse. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT's sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. And folks, let's talk about the quarterback market right now for the Orange. Now, earlier on in the podcast, we talked about Washington State's John Mateer and how, look, guys, he's the best player in the portal right now, at least at the quarterback position, but maybe overall. And while he would be a great fit for the Orange, he is not a feasible option. The reason why, he is most likely going to Oklahoma. So where do the Orange sit in the quarterback market? We know they need one, barring a miracle with Kyle McCord and getting that fifth-year waiver. So let's talk about Kaidon Salter. Kaidon Salter is the big one to keep an eye on here because, in my opinion, he still remains priority number one of all the guys that the Orange are either linked to right now or could be linked to in the future. We'll get to the guy who they could be linked to in a second. But first, Kaidon Salter. It's a two-horse race. Good news for those that want Kaidon Salter. Syracuse is one of those two schools. They just had him on a visit, him and Fran Brown. They were at the Syracuse-Georgetown game. And look, Kaidon, if you are watching or listening to this podcast, I'm really sorry that you had to watch that. I truly, truly am. I hope it was a great visit, but man, the basketball program, it's not very good, Kaidon. Just, you're not coming here to play basketball. Okay? You're coming here to play football. Focus on the football, please. Okay? But he was at the basketball game with Fran Brown. Now, Salter, the other school to keep an eye on is Colorado. So we got a Fran Brown and Deion Sanders battle for a quarterback. This is going to be fun. Look, he's visiting Colorado or sometime this week. It's a two-horse race. The other schools that were involved on Kaidon Salter, one of them was Florida State. Florida State, they had an excellent pivot idea. They went with Thomas Castellanos. Pause for laughter. They're going with Thomas Castellanos. That's hilarious. They're so down in the dumps, that program. And then you got Auburn, an SEC school that's trying to be good again, trying to be relevant again. Their plan is Jackson Arnold. I don't think they're going to go. I don't think either school is going to say, let's bring in Kaidon Salter to compete for the starting job with the guys they already got. I just don't see it happening. So that leaves the Orange and Colorado for Kaidon Salter. Fran Brown versus Deion Sanders, two excellent recruiters. So this should be very, very interesting. Ricky Collins from LSU. Now, for those that may have stumbled upon this podcast for the very first time, you don't know necessarily my thoughts on Ricky Collins. I've given them before, but I will summarize them for you right now. I don't love it. I don't love it. He was the third string at LSU, not the second string. It's just, it would not be priority number one, priority number two, or really even my priority number three of all the guys available. That's Ricky Collins. But he is still out there, and I think, honestly, Syracuse could end up with him. Then you got Anthony Calandria. Anthony Calandria, he has been the starter at Virginia the last couple of seasons. To mixed results. He's kind of mediocre. He's visiting Ole Miss. This is good for us because I didn't want Anthony Calandria to be the quarterback of Syracuse football next season. And you might be asking yourself, well, Ole Miss is taking a look at him. What do they know? Guys, I don't think he's going to start at Ole Miss. I really don't. Ole Miss is one of those teams that they'll take a bunch of transfers at a similar position and they'll have him sit. They'll have him sit. But you know what? Money talks, right? That's free agency, the portal for you. So that's Anthony Calandria. And then you got the new shiny object that's available for Syracuse football, and there seems to be some sort of traction on this one. I hope I'm getting his name right. I think I am. It's Beau Pribula. Beau Pribula. He was the backup at Penn State, not the third string like Ricky Collins, the backup. And when he has played at Penn State in limited action, he has been really, really effective. I think he's a Pennsylvania kid as well. And I believe I read this story correctly that him and Kyle McCord played each other in a state championship game in high school. Now, he's from Penn State, obviously, as I just said. And he's in the portal because of, well, the timing of the NCAA. That's just the system screwing up. Penn State's currently in the college football playoff. And I imagine he's in the portal because he wants to be a starter somewhere. So this is a type of kid that I think if Syracuse were to get him, he would be the starting quarterback in 2025. It's a name that Syracuse fans should keep an eye on. Beau Pribula from Penn State, because they haven't been... They've kind of been connected to him, but I haven't seen anything out there that says that they're definitely interested or that they've offered him or that there's a visit. Now, by the time you're watching or listening to this, I'm recording at 6:19. Things could have changed. But just keep an eye on Beau Pribula, the new shiny object that is available in the portal. But of those four guys, I still like Kaidon Salter. I'm a Kaidon Salter fan. What can I tell you? I like him. I think he could be really good for us. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, I honestly didn't even realize, I didn't know if I was going to do a full podcast today. So here's a little bonus for you, I guess. But as far as what's coming up in the future, tomorrow, offensive line podcast. There are several offensive linemen that the Orange are going after in the transfer portal. And we know that the offensive line is important. So we're going to discuss them on the podcast tomorrow. And by the way, you guys said on Poll Friday last week that that's the number one need aside from quarterback in the portal. So we're talking about offensive line. Speaking of Poll Friday, the Poll Friday question is out. It's basketball related. I want you to pay attention to the wording here. Will Adrian Autry be the head coach of Syracuse basketball next season? The key word there is will, not should. Will he be the next head coach of Syracuse basketball next year? And to vote for Poll Fridays, you can go on Twitter at @LO_Syracuse. It is in the description below. And you can also check out the YouTube community section of the Locked On Syracuse channel. I had the question posted there as well to vote. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Donald and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. You can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.